Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation on fee transparency, resident retention, and the evolving resident experience in multifamily housing. As the industry faces increasing scrutiny around fees, compliance, and communication, operators are also being challenged to think more strategically about trust, consistency, and the role transparency plays in both resident satisfaction and long-term retention. Today's discussion will explore how technology, operations, and innovation are converging to help move the industry forward, not just from a compliance perspective, but from a resident experience perspective as well. I'm Judy Bellack, the founder of Judith Lawrence Associates, and I work as an advisor with multifamily operators and PropTech companies on strategy, industry engagement, and go-to-market positioning. I'm excited to be facilitating our conversation today. I'm joined by an incredible group of industry leaders who are helping shape the future of multifamily technology and resident engagement, all of whom share a passion for innovating solutions that champion the resident experience. First, let's welcome Melissa Pasquale, Vice President of Corporate Development at Engrain. With a background spanning commercial real estate, economic development, and more than a decade in real estate technology, Melissa has built a reputation for bringing innovation and operational impact across the multifamily industry. At Engrain, she leads strategic partnerships focused on enhancing the property management and leasing experience, championing open integrations and forward-thinking technology solutions. Let's also welcome Bethany Fox, product lead at Renew. Bethany brings a thoughtful, product-driven perspective to the evolving resident experience with a strong focus on building technology that helps multifamily operators work smarter while creating better outcomes for renters. At Renew, she plays a key role in shaping the platform's product vision and innovation strategy, helping transform the traditionally manual renewal process into a more streamlined and data-informed experience. And finally, please welcome Rob Hayden, CEO and co-founder of Renew. Rob is one of the leading voices rethinking how the multifamily industry approaches resident retention, renewals, and the broader resident experience. With a background spanning startups, venture capital, and PropTech innovation, Rob co-founded Renew to help apartment operators modernize what has traditionally been one of the industry's most overlooked yet financially impactful moments, the lease renewal process. So let's start our conversation today. Most of the industry is talking about fee transparency and focusing on search and leasing. Why does the renewal moment deserve just as much, if not more, attention?
Is that one for me, Judy? I should
Yeah,
ask.
go for it. Whoever
Oh,
would like
sure.
to dive
I
in.
think that's your
That's me.
wheelhouse there,
All
Rob.
right. So it's a great question, Judy. It's something that we at Renew sort of spend our days trying to prove to the market and convince folks of. Because believe it or not, when we started this 5 years ago, I think people looked at us crossways sometimes when we said you should be focusing on renewal in the same way, if not in a greater way, than you focused on online leasing over the last 10 years. And if you think about what's happened with online leasing since, the early 2010s, you saw an influx of different tools that help folks focus on lead to lease, sort of conversion and all in costs and all this sort of scrutiny. But if you really pull back and look at what percent of rent revenue is captured via the new leasing moment, it's really somewhere between 40 to 45% of the rent roll captured via new leasing, right? That's the amount of folks who turned over. So you fill those new units. And then you look over at renewal, and that implies that maybe 55 to 60% of your rent rolls captured over there. And you ask folks, well, what tools are you using at renewal? What are the key metrics that you're focused on? How much have you standardized or centralized? And certainly 5 years ago, folks are getting better. But the answer was sort of crickets at that point. I think folks just really hadn't thought about renewal as, oh my gosh, this is acquisition. This is exactly the same thing as signing a net new lease that comes out of an ILS. And so certainly for our conversation today, what we've been thrilled to work with Engrain on is providing or applying the same level of rigor to the renewal moment, treating it as what it is, which is asking the customer to sign another 12-month contract and fork over $30,000, $40,000, and all the things that have effectively evolved and developed with new leasing, like fee transparency, we believe is starting to come to renewal. And so these principles that we've focused on are now applying to the other side of the sort of leasing experience, where we're doing the same thing, which is acquiring or reacquiring renters.
Yeah, as a longtime industry veteran, it is really nice to see this being tackled with the same fervor that lease acquisition is being tackled. So, Melissa, how are you thinking about fee transparency right now? Compliance checkbox or strategic priority? And has that answer changed over the last year?
Absolutely. It has changed over the last year. I would say it started as a checkbox that, certain states were more important to get this going as quickly as possible due to all of the regulatory environment and things going on with the FTC. So it was kind of a hurry up and make sure that you're compliant. But as we'll get into a little bit, there have been operators testing fee and price transparency in their leasing processes, and it is becoming more and more the way, the future of leasing, and they're proving that it works. So it's really exciting that, a year ago we were trying to convince people that fee transparency was a thing, and now it's becoming just, part of the entire process in our industry.
Yeah, again, really, really nice to see. But let's talk about the operator reality with all of this. What would you say is the biggest misconception operators have about all-in pricing today, especially when it comes to renewals versus new leases?
Well, I can say for the new leases, everything that the operators were saying is, my competitors aren't doing this. Why do I have to do it? It's going to make my property look more expensive, and I'm going to lose leads. I'm going to lose traffic to my website. All of these things that they're saying, are going to be negative in actually displaying everything that is going into a monthly bill, as well as the move in and move out costs, et cetera. Um, and as I mentioned, that's actually not happening. So it's been a really interesting transition just recently. So it's exciting to get into that. But Rob, what about the misconceptions from the renewal process?
Yeah, I think what Melissa hits on there is really interesting, and the way we see it manifest is that, you know, because of course of the proliferation of like revenue management systems, so many companies are really sensitive to and intelligent on what the exact right price is that's going to convert at the exact right rate to drive XYZ renewal rate or XYZ customer acquisition blended cost on the front end. And what we find when talking to a lot of residents and surveying them about like why didn't you renew, one of the pieces that comes up time and time and again is, I would have, it wasn't the $50 that bothered me. It wasn't the $10 extra on this fee or whatever it was. It was that like I didn't have the full picture and it felt like someone was hiding the ball. And what we hear, like one version of that is there's a feeling in the renewal process where it's always this and then, like I thought I did everything I was supposed to do. And then a new thing was introduced. And it's not always a fee, but a lot of times it is. It's like, oh, you have a pet. Oh, and it just keeps going. And they get to this place where they go, why is this so ticky tack or adversarial or whatever the word might be? Whereas, a lot of our own consumer experiences, I think of auto purchasing as an interesting comp, where there's places now that offer like, this is your all in price on day one. This is it. And the consumer preference there is this just feels more trustworthy, even if that all in price is marginally higher than that base price that you would have seen.
Absolutely. And a much better resident experience, a much better experience for the leasing staff, right? To not have to continually go back. I'm sure they absolutely
Totally.
hate that. Where else are you seeing operators get caught off guard?
Sorry, I don't want to. Yeah, Melissa's smarter. Go, Melissa.
No, no, absolutely. I mean, from the renter side, obviously, just like Rob was saying, it's, the fees or the move-in costs or, additional admin fees that, who knows what they are. And to your point about the leasing teams, they are loving being able to be completely transparent and, not having somebody come in and say, well, what's this $4 fee for? Like it's having that all up front. It allows them to focus on what they're truly there for, which is helping, the residents be happy living there, that nobody wants to play hide the pickle with, all of this
Right.
money that adds up after a while.
Yeah,
Um,
and let's face it, the renewal moment touches 100% of residents, right? So what's actually at stake when that experience is fragmented or opaque? I'd love to know, what you guys have seen within your systems on, how that impacts the renewal moment.
Yeah, Judy, one of the things that most of our customers sort of hold out as one of the key values of running a efficient and effective renewal process is the speed at which you can close out those renewals, right? Get the signed renewal.
Mhm.
Because as you sort of probably intuitively everyone understands, right? As you get that renewal in, that's reducing the sort of net supply in the building of units. And so that helps give more confidence around rent pricing on the front end. Similarly, when you get a notice to vacate quickly, you're reducing sort of the time, or you're increasing the time you can put it on the market, reducing vacancy loss. And so speed becomes this big conversation with our customers. But to sort of what Melissa was saying with, people sort of not wanting to have the uncomfortable situation, or maybe the data is just in disparate places. And so like the leasing staff is like, I didn't even have that information. What ends up happening is the resident says, I want to renew. Cool. That's, let's call that day one. And then it just takes like another 2 or 3 weeks for the leasing staff to go, oh, I forgot the pet fee changed. I got to go get that. Oh, you know what? There's a new amenity fee. I forgot. They did. And it just, those are days where the resident could be out there taking tours of other apartments, right? Because just because they said they wanted to renew doesn't mean they've signed a renewal lease. And they're not going to sign that renewal lease till they have all the fee data. And so having that integrated, so it's just like, I want to renew. Here's all my fees, sign on the dotted line. That makes a massive difference than between having like 2 or 3 weeks in between. I want to renew, and here's your final package.
And to add on to that, I think a lot of operators are forced to literally print a piece of paper that, has all of the fees on it because they're not connected to the renewals are not connected to the lease, the actual new lease process. And then, what do? They go print it and put it on in an envelope and tape it to the resident's door, right? So, I mean, I'm super curious to know how y'all have solved those kinds of problems with your platform.
Yeah, and thank you for the segue, Melissa, because fee data is supposed to live in the PMS, but in practice it often doesn't. I've been talking with a lot of operators over the last 6 weeks or so on a different project, and um, boy, has that emerged as a pain point. So, how does Engrain end up being the stopgap? And what does that tell us about where the industry is right now? And then, you know, Melissa, once you tell us a little bit about that, I'd love to hear, the answer to your question from Bethany and Rob.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when the FTC came down hard on operators on this whole junk fees law, it became apparent that the fees that operators have were not all consistent. They didn't have data in the same place. And it certainly wasn't all in the PMS in a way that was able to then be consumed by property technology companies like ours and then shown publicly online. And so we have been consuming pricing and availability feeds from the PMSs for years, but the data that is now required to give a renter an all-in monthly price did not exist in those feeds. And for most operators and most property management companies, systems didn't even have a place to consistently put that information. So everybody kind of knew it was important and we needed to figure out a solution to it, but the PMSs are large. And so making changes like that are not easy and they're not fast. fortunately, Engrain is not so huge that we couldn't pivot and make some changes to accommodate our clients. We already had great APIs that we share with many different prop tech companies, including the major ILSs. And so we were able to quickly put together some processes and help figure out how to standardize fees, stand side by side with our clients and help them figure out what fees they had and how to combine them and normalize them in order to put them into a data feed that we could all consume to create that all-in monthly price and to be powering these very complicated cost calculators so that resident or prospective residents can actually calculate what they're going to pay based on their unique situation. So it was a huge pivot for us, but we ended up being able to do it more easily than some of the larger companies. And we fully believe that that data should live in the PMS. And we're working side by side with those companies to help them make sure that all of that information is in there. But in the meantime, we've been able to function as that stopgap where we can provide the fees to augment the pricing coming from the PMS or even just add to it as our clients are being able to get some of that data out of the PMS and some of the data from Engrain. We put it all into our APIs that are then consumed upstream by folks like Renew and the large ILSs, and a lot of other companies who are showing that all-in monthly price.
Right. Which, yes, we're seeing the industry move so rapidly toward. So, Rob and Bethany, you know, keeping in mind everything that Melissa just addressed, what's the hardest part about keeping pricing consistent across the PMS ILS websites and renewal workflows? And why does it most often break down at renewal?
I think I'll take a first swing at this.
Mhm.
Renewal is such an interesting and unique moment, whereas compared to new leasing, where someone is it's a fully new experience, they're evaluating a totally new price. Renewal is this moment where they're at this intersection of kind of what have they historically been paying and what are they going to pay now after
Mhm.
a renewal. And so what we have found, similar to like what Melissa has said, the way that operators are keeping track of fees, especially around like fee changes, it's a piece of paper on a desk of, okay, the pet fee is going up from $25 to $35. And a lot of that, they wait to do often those changes at renewal. And so there really is not only what is this total price, but also dealing with this moment of some of those prices are changing. And so you're having, from a data perspective, what have they been previously paying? What's that data that we've been storing on, who's been paying this price for how long versus we've now changed this price on, one, two, three, however many fees.
Mhm.
And it just creates this moment of not only making sure that the data is in a place to be able to surface that to the resident, but you're also having this kind of conversation, wanting to be transparent about, okay, that price is changing, and having the data to be able to do that, which it sounds like it should be easy, and it's definitely not. So I think versus new leasing, where you can come into a calculator and say, hey, here's my experience, here's what I need. At renewal, they also might have had life changes. They might have gotten a new pet. They might have lost a pet. And so there's also sensitivity around what are the lifestyle factors that are changing, in addition to, based on state and local regulations, what are other fees that might look like they're being introduced but have historically just not been as visible. So I think it's a complex and sensitive moment. And so making sure that the data, one of the things that's been so great about Engrain is having the data structured in a way where we can really help support that transparency, because over the past many years that we've been working on this problem, it's really difficult.
Hmm. Yeah, it is definitely not easy, and I think every operator will acknowledge that. And it's really interesting that you bring up pet fees. As someone who's done a lot of work with an animal well organization that works within the industry, I can tell you that at least as little as a couple of years ago, pet fees just really were not in the PMS systems at all. I'm hoping that's changing, and it sounds like you guys have found a way to bring everything together, which is extraordinary. Rob, anything to add here?
Those were both the much more substantive answers, but the only thing could maybe add, I was thinking as both Melissa and Bethany were talking, for the operator that's listening to this, there sort of is this like first argument of like, hey, there's a bright line test, like you need to be compliant, but like we've all been in this industry, we know that the numbers talk as well. And so what is the cost of compliance? And I think Bethany provided a really interesting example. And we see this, I mean, just to put a sort of funny anecdote to it, we go in and we start working with a customer and we pull some resident who's been living there for 5 years. And let's say that they charge a $50 pet fee now, but that person is paying $10. And we say, what's like, is this a different pet fee? And they go, oh, no, 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 we just can't figure out how to update fees at renewal. So like they're just grandfathered in. And so it's like money left on the table, right? That's $40 a month for the last 4 years, that kind of thing. And so like this is just sort of like getting this right has real dollar implications. And then I think Melissa's point about like how fragmented a lot of times the data structures are. As a company like Renew, especially when we were smaller, doing the work to build an integration with this company and then get that company and then that company and then that company, that's cost. That's cost that we, of course, have to then build into our what we recoup and what we charge our customers. And so I, as an operator, when I'm looking at vendors, and this is maybe going to come off as way too much of an Engrain plug, but it's just true. It's like by working with Engrain, we're just like skipping a lot of that work. Like we just have it so that, oh, we didn't have to build 6 integrations. So now I didn't have to spend 6 months with 6 engineers. That's cost that doesn't go into my product. And so that's really valuable, I think, to the ecosystem, not just to like the way the product performs.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really, really great point, and sets us up well to dive into really the kind of the next topic within our discussion, which is transparency as a retention lever. So, there's a counterintuitive argument here that hiding fees doesn't protect operators. It actually accelerates churn. Can you make that case?
I think I started too earlier. I think I
Yeah.
got ahead of your question, Judy.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't
It's
didn't
okay.
know, but no, but I think that's just true. I mean, I think we've all been to I don't love making this comparison, but the other lease that people usually have in their life is a car, right? And not too many people associate that experience positively. And everybody knows that once you get into the finance office, all these things start popping up. And all of a sudden, what was a 299 lease offer looks totally different on that car. And I'm not, without taking that comparison too far, you got to have empathy for the resident who's sitting here going, not only am I getting a 5% increase, okay, I swallowed, like I get it, I'm good, I'm going to renew, but then these things keep on coming, and at some point, I think it just sort of makes, both for the leasing agent and for the resident, this experience, so full of like friction and like what else is coming, how else are you going to sort of air quotes nickel and dime me here, I'm not implying that, but it feels that way, that you start to see people just walk away from this experience. And then the only other point there is, from our perspective, what we generally are talking constantly with our customers about is compressing the time from offer to signature isn't just good for occupancy forecasting. What you see is as that rate of time compresses, renewal rates go up, right? Because people aren't taking the extra weekend to take the tour down the street, because they're not going to their other options. And so, as best you can to present, this is it. Can you say yes to that? A, like you get them over one hump instead of seven. And then B, you make it a quick decision, and it's good for your business, both from like a efficiency standpoint, but also from a renewal rate perspective.
Yeah, and I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into that. After making the statement that, I as someone who's been in the industry a very, very long time, I'm loving that the whole fee transparency discussion is sort of, kind of guiding operators back to a renewed focus on the renter experience, right? And the resident experience when they're renewing, because I think it's very easy in any industry, and especially once you have abundant technology coming at you. And, there's been a tremendous amount of new technology in the industry over the last decade. It's easy to become really focused on the technology and the internal workings and sort of forget about focusing on that renter and resident experience. So I kind of love where this is taking us again as an industry. But diving a little bit deeper into, getting to renewal decisions faster, um, how much of that do you attribute specifically to pricing clarity? And more importantly, what does that mean for NOI?
Absolutely. And Bethany, you might have thoughts on this as well, but I think, when we go to a customer and start with them, and one of the things we anchor in is, okay, what percentage of renewal decisions come in the first 2 weeks of your renewal period? And, we see things in the single digit percentages. Generally, if someone's at like 15, 20%, we're like, hey, that's a good starting place. What we tell them is we're going to drive that above 50% within the first 2 months of using the product. And at first, they sort of don't believe it. It ends up happening. And then they go, why did that happen? And to your point, Judy, some of it's, we've digitized the experience. Like that stuff we all sort of know. But when you really dig into what makes renewals, and I think probably the same principle applies for new leasing, but what makes them take longer than maybe they should is anytime you insert a situation, and Melissa sort of referenced this, where like the leasing staff has to go find the answer, go get a piece of paper, put that on your door, wait for you to come into the leasing office, send another email, get on a call, like all those things have like these like 48-hour turnaround windows. And before you know it, if there's 3 or 4 of those things, you've added a week and then you've added 2 weeks. And so it's just a massive driver of if you can present the opportunity for them to say yes and see all of it and then sign the lease immediately or near immediately thereafter, you see people renew in 2 hours. I mean, literally 2 hours. And not only is that a benefit to renewal rates, but to your question, Judy, like there's the NOI impacts I said at the beginning of reduced vacancy loss, improved occupancy forecasting. But everybody is thinking about what are my operational expenses? And
Mhm.
everyone knows that leasing agents are pulled in 76 different directions. And if you get to take, you don't have to go hunt down what the new amenity fee is. And then you don't have to walk and go up 6 elevators and over here to put a piece of paper that's, that adds up. And so there is just like a straight operational efficiency play too.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a stretch to say that, these are the kinds of things that technology can do that positively impact a leasing agent's day, that also will positively impact turnover. Because, let's face it, the industry's had a tremendous amount of turnover at the site level for a variety of reasons. But I think we all know intuitively that one of those reasons is they are just so overwhelmed with administrative tasks. And at the end of the day, they were hired basically to be salespeople. And what do we know about salespeople? They really hate administrative tasks. So this speaks to all of that. Melissa, you saw the same shift with unit level pricing at sitemap on sitemap. Renters demanded more detail, and properties that provided it converted better. Are we seeing the same pattern now with fee transparency?
Absolutely huge. I mean, we as an industry used to market properties by floor plan.
Hmm.
And, that is something that we've found also most prop tech companies, their entire database was centered around the floor plan search. And
Hmm.
so when we introduced our sitemap product, which allowed people to actually view individual units and all of the content and pricing and information specific to that unit, it
Hmm.
completely changed the way that people search for apartments.
Right.
And that is exactly what's happening now with the fee transparency, because once that renters saw that they could actually search for a specific unit, not a floor plan, and then, maybe which units are available that fit my criteria, and then let me go look into this other floor plan. That was what they're now demanding, is being able to have all of that unit down to even virtual tours of that specific unit.
Right.
And so that just spread like wildfire, and that's now what renters expect. And so the same thing is happening with price transparency and total monthly leasing price. because that is now a thing and it is available by many operators and on many platforms where you search for an apartment, that is what renters are starting to expect. And I think renewals, it's the exact same thing. And, it is completely changing the industry, like I said. So I think it is going to be standard. And now that that technology exists, renters are demanding it. And just to add on to one other piece of, what you guys were saying earlier, the operators that offer this are also seeing a huge increase in reputation,
I
bumps
bet.
because, like I said, this is what people want. And when the operators are giving it to them, instead of their stats going down, their stats are going up because people like that and people want that.
Yeah. Well, you hit on it. Renter expectation, right? And when expectations are met, people are happier, they complain a lot less. So, a great thing for the industry. So, let's dive into a little bit more nuance with this. There's a hidden monetization problem at renewal. Grandfathered fees, you hit on this a little bit earlier, Rob. Fees that were never updated in the PMS, pet fees, which we hit on that new applicants pay at a higher rate than renewing residents. Bethany, how common is this? And do you have some other examples of it? And what should operators do about it?
It's so common. We see we see it all the time across so many of our partners. And especially, one of the things I really love to do is sit down and spend in times, especially with leasing teams, and take me through your workflow. What are the problems that you face? And this is a consistent one that we always hear. I think that pet fees are obviously a large one, but then you also think about the nuance of fees that have a deposit versus a recurring amount, and what the breakdown of that's obviously something that often happens for a pet fee.
Mhm.
But then you have complexity also around if you're thinking about a parking spot and availability, and maybe there's motorcycle parking versus a car parking, and so the difference in pricing. Storage, different sizes. There's not only, you might just say, oh, there's only a handful of types of fees, but there's so much nuance broken down within
And
all
to
of
add
them.
on to that,
Yes, definitely.
some states even have capped fees. So like
Mm,
in certain areas, if you have three cats, the operator can only charge you for two. So that was something that, we've had to work into our fee calculators along with many other nuances like that, Bethany, to be able, because it's complicated.
it's complicated. And to that point, I just thought of this too, of like the tiered pricing, as well as maybe your first two are, $20 and the third one is 10, or, whatever it might be. And so there's so much complexity. We see it all the time. And it's a huge administrative burden to try to say, okay, how do we, you know, especially if you're doing it on a piece of paper, or if your systems are working against you, not with you, on, what does somebody owe? We are always trying to see how can we build trust between all parties, especially as kind of to the last points. I think expectations are rising across other industries. When you look at, I think about ticketing is a big one. If you're trying to buy tickets, or a hotel room or anything like that, you're now seeing all in pricing. And so the expectations, I think, for residents, especially on such a large purchase decision, are also raising. And so I think the biggest thing is, it really comes down to like how you're structuring and managing your data. And that's honestly such like a personal thing for each operator, depending on which tools they're using. But that's kind of one of the biggest things, is prioritizing how you are orchestrating and setting up that data really is what empowers you for success. It's kind of my one size fits all answer on that.
Right. No, no, no. That's great. And Bethany, it's so interesting that you mentioned hotels. I was just in Huntington Beach at AIM, and
Mm.
they are not there yet. My hotel had about
Same.
$100 in additional add-on fees that they did not disclose to me when I made the reservation. It was in a separate place, right? But it was not in an
Mm.
all-in. And
Yeah.
that, like as a consumer, and I'm not a renter, but I can tell you that is my expectation when I'm looking at pricing on anything.
Yeah.
And Melissa, you hit on, legislation. There is more and more legislation coming down the pike, not only capping fees, but deciding what fees can be charged at all.
Yeah.
California has some a major legislation that's gone through the House and now is will be going before the Senate in the next few weeks. It's pet legislation. It is not about fees, but it is about what what the operator must disclose on the lease in terms of what the fees are, when are they charged, so on and so forth. I mean, they're getting super specific about what fee transparency must look like. So a lot of that is coming down the pike. But this, and what Renew and Engrain are doing is just helping operators be so much more proactive, right, rather than waiting on legislation.
Yeah, and the big change too that I think a lot of operators didn't understand is when I first started bringing up this topic with people more than a year ago, I got a lot of pushback and said, well, we always disclose our fees in the lease. We don't hide them. But the regulations are now saying you have to disclose all of those fees to a potential renter before they go into an application.
Yes.
And that is the big change that we've had to make as an industry, and why Engrain and the ILSs and the website development agencies have all had to make major changes to our platforms to accommodate showing all of those fees at a very
Yes.
detailed level, plus the all-in monthly rental price is becoming, you have to put that out there up front before they click into an application.
Yeah, absolutely. And the California legislation I mentioned before also stipulates that that fee transparency must occur on all marketing.
Yep.
So, it's a heavy lift kind of legislation. But I think that again, serves the resident really well or the renter really well, and is something that you guys are already helping the industry do, which is incredible. So my last question then with that is, before we close, is, how do Engrain and Renew work together? And we've covered a lot of that, but just in case you guys have anything to add to that, how do you work together to reduce the complexity, and how do you balance showing fee detail without overwhelming the resident?
Well, let me just start with the basics of how we are working with our clients. I mean, as we've discussed, a lot of operators do not have the capacity or the data that is required to be able to be transparent with all of this pricing. So the first thing we're doing is actually working very closely with our clients to help them determine where is their data? What does their data look like? We created a schema. We've been working very closely with the MITS group from
Oh,
NMHC, NAA. And so we're all trying to work together to standardize this data. And so we're literally, helping our clients find and combine and all this data into one place so that we can then feed it into that marketing engine and push it out to all of our partners in a way that is consistent, as Bethany mentioned earlier. So, if people don't know, even where to start, we've had the past year and a half, so we are happy to help people figure out where to begin.
I'm happy to frame a very quick version, and then I think Bethany probably can punctuate it better. Within our experience, we're unique in that we both present the renewal, but also if a resident's not renewing and says so, we expose the rest of the operator's portfolio to them to say, here's availability elsewhere. And so effectively within our product, the resident could on one moment experience their renewal and in the next moment experience an ILS-like experience of intra-portfolio movement. And so because you're showing those two things, if it's apples to oranges, that feels pretty weird, right? It feels like, wait, which part was wrong? How is this not working? And so for us, that was really important, like providing sort of this standardized level of quality for both sides of the experience. So for us, and maybe I'll tee up Bethany here, we had a very, very large mutual customer who basically said, we need to solve this problem. We were staring at it as, oh my gosh, that's a lot of work. And then we realized there was a really clean path into partnering with Engrain and making it sort of this, oh wow, problem solved. Obviously, it wasn't as easy as the like Staples easy button of just it took one day. It took some good collaboration between our companies, you know, and very much of that was driven by Bethany. So maybe I should give you the last word on that, Bethany.
I think it's yeah, to Rob's point around the consistency from like the renewal to then putting them into kind of that new leasing experience, especially if they're leaving and wanting that to be consistent is super important. But Judy, one of the things that you said that I've been thinking about is, you know, it's like there's so much information. And so how do you balance the transparency while also making a really user resident friendly experience? It's the thing that I spend most of my time thinking about. And so I think, you know, one, some of the tools that Engrain has out of the box, like they're, you know, that the calculator is structures it in such a, you know, a clear cut way for the resident to come in and say, what is my expected total cost? And makes, you know, standardizing that really, really easy. But then from a renewal standpoint, it's, yeah, how do you balance showing information on when charges are happening, in terms of frequency, and what's the definition of a charge, and, you know, is it capped, is it required, is it optional, all of those things. I think that in terms of how we work together, you know, we can only display the data that we have if it is structured in a way that's really easy to present. And so I think that from the working together perspective, being able to package up and standardize that all of that data so that we can really focus on, okay, well, then how do we just make this experience feel really easy? If it feels easy, then there was probably a lot of work that went into it. And so I think that's the thing that for me, in terms of the working relationship, it's how do we get that consistency, and how do we make it, you know, really standard, easy to use, easy to understand. And that's, I feel like they've really been the engine behind how we can do that in a standardized way at scale.
That's amazing. And so I'll go back to my last question, which was, you know, for the operator who is procrastinating, who feels like, this is, you know, a little too much work, or I don't really need to do this quite yet. What are the risks?
I'll take a sort of like shotgun approach to it, but I'm sure Melissa and Bethany will have more thoughtful answers. But I think like, you know, a lot of times we like hang compliance out there as like compliance, the government's going to get you.
Mhm.
And like, yes, like without a doubt. And I think that's been most of the conversation and probably is the impetus for the majority of folks who have leaned in here. They like, I do not want to be named, frankly, in some of the sort of government action. So that's one. If that doesn't get you, the other one, I think Judy used three R's that were really good, and I can't remember, but the second was revenue. And to me, that's usually the language, you know, that sort of like lands with a lot of business owners, right? That are trying to optimize, how am I increasing rents? How am I managing costs? And sometimes what people totally forget is that they have all this other income, you know, and moving other income marginally is material for their business. And so if you're leaving $10 a month in pet fees on the table for the 75% of your residents that have a pet, what does that add up to? And at a six cap rate, like what does that mean for asset value? Like, and I know that the folks listening to this like intuitively get that, but the number gets really big really fast. And so if you're not, you know, if the government part doesn't scare you, I think that the revenue left on the table is just like this wild thing, that we certainly see when it comes to rentable items, you know, and other fees. It's like if you have it structured, there are companies, you know, like Renew, but plenty of others who have devised solutions to drive better adoption of these things for you to help you with that. But we can't get started until it's structured.
Yeah. Well, and I think you hit on such an important point. Yes, there's the compliance issue, and I think the industry is always, you know, very cognizant of those issues and tries to stay compliant. But there's the whole revenue piece of that, right? And particularly if you are a fee manager who
Mhm.
is accountable to an owner, you want to be able to say to that owner, "We got this."
Mhm.
Well, and I think what again also is at stake is the sentiment by renters and
Yeah.
residents of, you know, if they think you're being shady, they're going to go someplace else. And this is becoming a standard in our industry, not just because of the compliance, but because it's the right thing to do. You know, we all want to know what we're paying at our hotel or going to a concert or buying a car. This is a huge piece of your life where you're living. And it is only going to increase your NOI at your property because you have people that are happier, you're getting more quality leads, you're getting the people renting the units there that can actually afford it because they know how much they're going
Yeah.
to be spending. And so you're reducing that debt, that comes from people that end up not being able to afford to live there eventually. Um, so it is just, the thing we've been telling people for more than a year now is it's just the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And, even the ILSs are realizing that and not just doing it just to be compliant, but because that's what people want. And we learned at AIM this past week, like Apartments.com is actually putting listings that display total monthly price at the top of the search algorithm. So
Oh,
it is becoming more of a standard in the industry, not just a compliance thing.
well, and that's a major change for as an ILS gal for many, many years, that is a major change for the ILSs. So good for them for leading the way on that. So,
I know we're supposed to be on the downslope of wrapping up here, but Melissa,
yes.
I hadn't even thought of that point that there's a number of folks that come in thinking it's $2,000, and maybe even by the end of the application period, it's gone up by 15% because of fees, and they either drop out or they still sign the lease, but then create bad debt. I hadn't even thought of that. That's just really interesting. We can do another hour on that probably.
And
Yeah,
the same thing happens with the leads because, everybody thought that the funnel was going to get smaller. It actually didn't get smaller, it got bigger, and those leads got to be
more
like
efficient. Yeah,
so much more quality of leads
yeah,
because
yeah,
and conversions from there because
yeah.
people actually know which unit it is that they want and they know how much they're going to pay. So
Yep, yep.
it's
Exactly.
just like you were saying with the renewals. It's fast, it's easy once they have the information that they need.
So this has been a really great conversation, and I feel like we could probably talk for at least
Yes.
another hour on this because there is a lot of nuance to it. There are so many examples. We could go ahead down a whole rabbit hole of how data doesn't talk to each other right now, right? Just that alone. But I do want to give Melissa, you with Engrain and Rob, you with Renew, an opportunity to just tell people a little bit more about what each of your organizations does. And Melissa, we'll start with you.
Well, I think, going through this whole, if you've watched this whole session, you probably understand a little bit about what Engrain does. But yes, our core product is the interactive sitemap that is built to be embedded into any existing website. We have fabulous APIs and a great team that helps provide all that transparency down to the unit level. We work with great partners, but our whole goal is to, bring that innovation technology and, streamlining data across the leasing process. And we sort of accidentally found that our maps and our data are also super valuable to other prop tech companies. And so that is why we've really created our partnership program. And we share data and maps with other prop tech companies like Renew. And it's great for the clients because they only have to do these complicated maps and pull all this data together one time. And then we're able to basically syndicate that across a lot of other platforms. And we absolutely love working with our partners. And, I feel like the prop tech industry has come such a long way, and it's super exciting to see companies like Renew who are tackling these new and different problems in our industry. So very happy to be partnered with you guys.
Thank you, Melissa. And Rob
Thank you.
will let you have the last word with Renew.
Ooh, I have animations going. This is
Oh,
cool.
look at that.
Yeah, wow. So so Renew is the AI-powered renewal and retention platform for institutional multifamily operators. What we beg our customers to do is not just think about renewing leases, but think about renewing residents, and adapting to what the changes in their lives have been over the 12 months that they've already lived with them. What that means practically is we're giving you the tools to go on offense at renewals instead of playing defense and being reactive. Generally, what that gets you is more than half your decisions in the first 2 weeks of the renewal window, a 2 to 3% lift in retention rate on property, and a full sort of networked based retention strategy for your portfolio. And sort of we work with folks all across, sort of the multifamily spectrum, from them NMHC top 50 to smaller owners, with regional portfolios. But our job is to come in and basically give you a ton of confidence and data around retention, so that you can turn it into the acquisition driver that you've been sort of doing to the front end of your leasing experience for the last 10 years. So that's Renew in a very short nutshell. And I'll leave it there.
Great. Thank you very much. And I know I'm a little biased because Renew is a client of mine, but you guys do have an exceptional platform. And Melissa, it's been really nice to do this with you and learn more about the Engrain platform. And so thank you to the three of you, for, helping us put all this together. And thank you to everyone who's joined us. And we hope you have some great takeaways from our time together. And let's go out there and make the industry a more transparent place. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Bethany.